All right, 7 o'clock, so I guess we got a good many people here, so we'll go ahead and get started. So tonight we are going to be talking about connectors, and basically we'll start off here with one of our most ordinary connectors, and hopefully you guys can see these pretty good. We'll start out with this, which is our 1/4-inch connector. And our two main connectors in audio that we run into are the 1/4-inch and the here we go, XLR. So hopefully you guys can see this pretty well. Right here is the XLR. Let's start with this one actually, because everybody's going to use XLRs. So XLRs are 3-pin connectors, and that's carries what's called a balanced audio signal. And there, of course, let me double check, be sure we ain't got anybody. Yep, nobody trying to get in. Balanced audio connectors. So this is what goes in the bottom of a microphone, and it's 3 conductors. A conductor is a piece of wire that's isolated from other pieces of wire that a signal goes through. So to be able to get a signal from a microphone, you need all 3 conductors, and that's what the XLR has. This is a female XLR, and this is a male XLR with the protruding little things there. So like I said, this is called balanced, and balanced cables are 3 conductor cables. And we'll contrast that to 1/4-inch. Now you see 1/4-inch, we have 2 conductors. Get where you guys can see it. We have the tip and the ring. All right, now the difference here is you have just a positive and a negative, and also the ground. So the negative and the ground both travel through the same connector. Now this is for guitar signals and line level signals. Like for instance, a line level signal would be something that comes out of your interface. This goes from the interface to your speakers. That's line level, and you can use 1/4-inch for that. Also, you see you have 1/4-inch here on the front of the interface. And that 1/4-inch is for instrument level. It comes from your instrument into the interface. So these cables, the 1/4-inch cables, can be for line level or instrument level and speaker level. Actually, some speaker cables actually use this connector as well. So the 1/4-inch connector, let somebody in here. The 1/4-inch connector is the most common connector as far as the different jobs that it can do. So this can be speaker level, guitar or instrument level, or line level. Now we'll look at another type of, let me find it. Another type of 1/4-inch, and you'll notice, nope, that's not 1/4-inch, sorry. Here we go, here's one. Now this is a 1/4-inch that is balanced. You guys see that? There's a tip, ring, and a sleeve. So here you have a positive, negative, and your ground are separate. So why would you use a balanced one instead of an unbalanced one? Now, an unbalanced one cannot be used for speaker, and it cannot be used for, let me let somebody else in. A balanced 1/4-inch cannot be used for speaker level, and it cannot be used for instrument level. It is only good for balanced line level. So let's talk about the word balanced. Balanced means that there's no noise will get into the cable. Now, if you're hooking your interface up to your speakers and use the unbalanced cable, let's get the unbalanced cable out again. So if you decide to use this cable to come out of your interface to your speakers instead of the balanced tip ring sleeve cable, this is a tip sleeve 1/4-inch, this is a tip ring sleeve 1/4-inch. So this one will be quiet, and this one will pick up computer noise and things like that. So there's the reason that you want to use a balanced cable. So when you buy cables to hook up your interface to your speakers in your studio, you'll want balanced. Also in pro audio, where you're coming out of a live mixing board into power amps, you'll want to use balanced cables. Now in that case, we see that also XLRs are balanced because there are 3 conductors. Let's get where you guys can see it. So basically, the tip ring sleeve and the XLR are our 2 balanced connections. So those are noiseless connections, meaning no noise will be picked up through the cable while it's run. And let me get out of a microphone.
Which one is the positive and negative charge on the cable?
So the question is, which is the positive and negative? Now on these, there's positive on the tip and negative here on the ring, and the sleeve is your ground. Now here you have 3 pins, pin 1, 2, and 3. And always pin 1 in this is always your ground, and that leaves pin 2 and 3 to get the other conductors. And I think pin 3 is usually hot. It kind of can, some people actually wire pin 2 hot, but I think pin 3 is usually hot. Or maybe it's 2, I can't even remember. When I wire them, I do a lot of soldering myself. Obviously, when you're wiring up a cable, each end of the cable has to go to the appropriate other end. I'll show you a piece of cable. So basically, these connectors are soldered on the raw cable. There's a connector, and there's a piece of cable. Now, this piece of cable, as you'll notice, see there's 2 conductors, so that's for an unbalanced. So you have here where there's something called a shield, and you'll see how that shield is wrapped around the cable, and the shield is connected to the ground pin. Here's what an actual 1/4-inch connector looks like. So when you solder it, the tip goes here like that, and the ground/negative goes to this part. And basically, so your hot signal goes to that, and your ground/shield. So this cable is shielded, meaning that there's a shield that wraps around the. Oh, we just had an in-person show up to the class. We're doing the class via Zoom. You're welcome to sit in, though. Hopefully, you can get something out of it there. So yeah, sit up here at the front, and you can watch as well. I don't know if you got your book with you, but you can follow along if you do. So we had one person actually show up live. I figured that might happen. All right, so we have here our unbalanced situation here. Now, here is a piece of balanced wire. Now, this also has you'll see there's a shield here, and you have a positive and negative in a separate shield. Now, notice this one, though. It's really interesting because the shield is a very expensive cable. The shield is actually braided. You see how that is? It's braided to shield the inside inner wires. And that's connected to pin 1, which connects to the ground, which gives us a whole topic about where does noise go in an audio signal. It goes to the ground. And the ground is actually connected to the ground of the electrical in the building. Your electrical wires also are 3 conductor, and the middle conductor is your ground. So your audio gear and your mic actually is connected to your computer, and your interface is plugged into the electricity, and then it's grounded. And that's how all buildings are wired, with the 3-pin or the ground pin wired there, and all the noise goes there. So when you have a balanced situation, the noise goes to ground. And even with unbalanced, noise goes to ground. So if you have an ungrounded situation, that means it'll be noisier because the ground is kind of where, let me let somebody else in, where things go. And speaking of the book, let me get my book out. Well, I had it here. Well, here it is. Okay, under my keys. So let's kind of look at all the connectors we need to run over tonight. And you guys want to follow in the book. And you can see even on the signal flow page, it's got a little bit about balanced and unbalanced connections. And then we get into, let's get on into, there's a page here with, I'll eventually get to it, interfacing. And we should have some pictures here of all of our connectors. Yeah. So these pictures are all the connectors that you'll need to know for your tests. And you see that we just ran over XLR, TRS, 1/4 inch, and the tip sleeve. And the jobs, obviously, of the XLR, they can take balanced line level audio or balanced mic level audio. The 1/4 inch can take speaker level audio, which is unbalanced, instrument level audio, which is unbalanced, or tip ring sleeve for balanced line level. So we have those. And then moving on to some more connectors. This one's handy, so I'll move on to these kind of out of order. This is a kind of a lesser seen connector. These are RCAs. And RCAs, I'll show you all these after class if you want to look at them, man. These RCAs are basically a consumer level connector. And they basically, instead of operating at 0 dB, they operate at -10. And you'll see, I brought a couple of pieces of gear. Let me see if I can show this. To show, here's your panel mount version of it right there. See, there's your RCA inputs. So lots of audio gear have these RCA inputs. And what that is for connecting consumer level gear in or out of pro level gear. So we got any questions popping up here? No, it doesn't seem like it. So that's your third connector after the 1/4 inch and the XLR would be the RCA. And it is an unbalanced connector, and it's probably a noisy and not a very well made connector. It's something that's designed many, many years ago, and it just is kind of hung on as time goes on. Another connector that we have that is actually a more modern one. Let's see. I have all these cables around me. Let me reach back here and grab one more. Here's a very common cable too. This is a speak-on. Now, a speak-on is like the word says, it is a speaker level only connection. So this is the only thing you would use this for, is to come out of a power amp of some sort and go into a passive speaker. So as you see on the back of an amplifier, this one has a combination of 1/4 inch or speak-on. So you can see both of those in this case are carrying the speaker level signal. And of course, on the input of a speaker cabinet, it looks the same. It'll have maybe a 1/4 inch and or a speak-on connector there. All right, looks like nobody else is trying to get in. And for those latecomers, just go ahead and put your name in the chat window so I can take a roll for you, please. And then we'll talk a little bit about Let's see. The actual wire. Here's one of the most important things we'll talk about tonight. Now check this out. This is the wire that goes into a speaker cable. Now you see that this wire has no shield. It's just plain wire like you would expect to find in an extension cord, a power cable. And a power cable that you would run in your house would be basically the same wires you'd use for speaker cable. It's a heavier gauge for the heavier amount of power, and it does not need to worry about, it's a very loud signal, so it's not going to pick up noise. So you don't need shielding on a speaker cable. So that's what a speaker cable looks like. And I don't know where that other one is now. Here it is. And of course, you can see now what shielded cable looks like. It's got the shield on it. So a really important thing is, what is the difference then between a speaker cable and a guitar cable? If they both have 1/4-inch cables on it, what would be the difference? Can anybody tell me the difference between a speaker cable, a 1/4-inch speaker cable, and a 1/4-inch guitar cable? All right, I'm checking the chat window to see if anybody knows the answer. I don't see any answers there. Okay, the answer is a guitar cable is shielded, a speaker cable is unshielded. Very important to know that, because if you try to use a speaker cable for a guitar, it's going to be very, very, very noisy. Somebody also put that the gauge is thicker. That is also correct. That is the secondary answer. You could have a light-duty speaker cable that had thin wire, but the absolute answer to the question is always, what's the difference between a speaker cable and a guitar cable? The guitar cable is shielded. The speaker cable is not shielded. So there's always the answer. And one time I had a guy come to work for me, and he'd go into a 4-year audio program, and he could not tell me the difference between a speaker cable and a guitar cable. And I'm like, I cannot believe it. This guy went to a 4-year program for audio and doesn't know the absolute basics about connectors and cabling. I would think anybody that would go to a 4-year program should be able to even solder and create and make and repair their own cables. And I would also say, if any of you guys are do-it-yourselfers, to buy a soldering iron to be able to fix and make your own audio cables is a very good thing, especially if you try to get a job in the business. I remember one time I worked at a sound company, and they said, should we hire this guy? I said, well, let's give him some cable and some connectors and see if he can solder them. And there you go. Another question would be something they would ask you, do you know the difference between a guitar cable and a speaker cable? Okay, so let's go back to the book. And can't believe I didn't leave it open to the right page. Okay, so we've done XLR, speak on, and the XLR male, XLR female, speak on. And now we'll go on to banana. Banana is also a speaker level. Okay, I see a question. Which cable is shielded and not shielded? So guitar cable, shielded. Speaker cable, not shielded. Looking back at the speaker cable wire, this is your speaker cable wire, and you see there is no shield. No shield. The shield is the part that wraps around the inside of the cable. And I'll show you again. I'm dropping my stuff all around me because I don't have a very good table here for all of this. Let's see. Oh, here we go. Yeah, there's the example again of the shielded cable. You see here, the shield wraps around. The shield wraps around the cable. You see where it's braided and goes around it. Now this is a mic cable, and if it looked like that and only had a shield and one conductor, it would be an instrument cable, a guitar cable, or a unbalanced line level cable. Okay, next we're getting to banana. All right, a banana is an old school speaker level cable. Now this one particular cable would be a banana 2/4 inch. So let's look at both ends of this. There's your 1/4 inch end of the speaker cable. And there is your banana end. So this would go into a power amp, and out of the power amp, then into the input of the speaker cable. So you can see there's on the back of the power amp, it's a red and a black output protruding. And you see this little tab here, right there? See the tab? That is your negative. So that will go to the black, and that goes to the red. So when you hook this up to a power amp, the little ground tab that you'll see right there, I guess everybody can see that little ground tab poking out on the side. Is that better maybe? Ground tab. That one with a little knob on the side. It'll actually say GND for ground on it. And that goes to the black, and then the non-ground tab one goes to the red, which is the positive. Again, positive always goes to the tip, and this is the tip shield cable, and the negative goes here. And also, like somebody said before, these are heavier gauge cable. And one thing you always remember about cable is the bigger the number, the smaller the cable. So if this is a fairly heavy duty speaker cable, it might be a 14 gauge. If it was a fatter or bigger cable, it would be a 12 or a 10 gauge. And as you go up in number, the gauges go down. A microphone cable might be maybe a 22 gauge or something like that. So it's a much smaller cable than speaker cable. Speaker cable is a fat cable, usually about the same thickness as a power cable that you'd have around your house. Somebody says, why is it banana cable? I do not name them. I'll just have to say that. It is a banana cable because the name is banana. I do not make the names up. But but also they kind of bulge out here a little bit. Maybe that's how they got their name. When they go in, the pressure bashes in. But that is the name of the connector. Funny or not, it is a banana. So if you want to take a test and pass it, call it a banana. And like I said, we have a speaker. This is a banana 1/4 speaker cable. Okay. Looking back at our list, we've done the speak on. So there's a panel mount jack right here. And what the panel mount jack is basically, that's a panel mount. That's what's on a panel. These are all panel mount jacks here. It's a panel mount XLR, panel mount RCA, and panel mount 1/4 inch. So that's when you say panel mount, that's what that means. The others are obviously cable mount. All right, so next on the list, we have the idea of the snake. Now, I don't have the exact snake that we're using, but basically the snake is where you have a bunch of cables built into one device. Now, there's one that we have in the classroom, and we'll actually use this in the classroom. And this is a mic snake, so I'll show it to you. Now, here is the box end of the mic snake, and you can see that we have 8 mic connectors, XLRs, and then we have 4 TRSs, tip ring sleeve. So with this, I put this in the booth, and when I want to record somebody in the booth, I run a mic into it, and I also run the headphone signal through this because the headphone signal also goes through a TRS. So there's one side end of the snake, and you see it's a 50-foot snake. And on the other end, we have what's called the fan. This is the fan. And you see we have a total of 12 channels going through this. They're all labeled. This is, for instance, this is channel 8, channel 4, and then you have your tip ring sleeve. So you see you got your XLRs and your TRSs. So I'd plug that into the headphone output of my interface, and I plug that into the microphone input. That way I can send signal from the microphone in the booth up here to the interface, and then I send a signal from the headphone amp in the interface back to the artist. So if you try to have a recording booth or room in another room, you'll need a snake to get the stuff from point A to point B. So you name the snake by the connectors on each end. If this was RCA's, this would be a RCA to XLR, or you can have an XLR to XLR snake, quarter inch to quarter inch, RCA to quarter, or in any end of the snake can have, one end could be a multi-pin and the other end could be whatever. So snakes are just something you buy as you need. You might have a thing where you need to run 8 mic signals of certain distance, and you'll need, a box on one end so you can plug the mics in, and XLRs on the other end so you can plug that into your interface. So if you have a recording studio and have a booth or something like that, it's usually good to have a snake. I always pull a snake through the wall if I'm recording. My studio has like about 5, 6 snakes, mic snakes going through the wall from the recording room into the control room. Okay, what else have we got? We have a couple of snakes that I didn't bring in. Here it just says snake. And that particular snake, if you look at it, is an RCA to quarter inch snake. And here you have another snake, and that is a DB25 to XLR. Now, a DB25 is a multi-pin connector that will take 8 balanced connections, and you might order a piece of gear. I don't have a way to show it right now that has 8 inputs, and all they have is that one DB25 connector, and that allows all 8 inputs to go into that interface. So any questions about any of these connectors or the job of any of the connectors so far? I think, let me see if I have a ground lift adapter. I did not grab that. Believe it or not, these little things that you see for $1 at the hardware store are very important audio connectors. And you see on one end, when we talk about electrical ground, you have your positive and negative for your electrical there, and there is your ground. But you'll see on the other side, there is no ground. So if you want to underground a piece of audio equipment, you use one of these ground lift adapters. So what happens in audio, we get, has everybody heard a hum in a sound system before? Well, that hum is because your equipment is grounded in too many different places. So what you have to do is find out which one's causing the hum and plug that piece of gear into this so that the ground does not cause the problem. You remember we said all noise goes to ground? Well, what happens is when you plug the grounds into different outlets around the house, those different pathways to ground confuse how the noise is going to ground, and it makes the noise stay in the system. You get a hum. So the way to get rid of the hum in the system is often to lift a ground. And that's why a lot of audio gear has ground lift switches on it, like a DirectBox and other things will have ground lift switches so you can lift the ground and eliminate noise. So the 2 ways that you get noises into audio systems is by ground, and what was the other, who can tell me the other way that noises get into audio systems that we talked about earlier? Let me see in the chat window, does everybody remember? How do we be sure not to get noise into our audio? Can everybody remember that? Exactly. Somebody popped up, Diego pops up, unshielded cables, right. If you use the 2 conductor quarter inch cables, those are unshielded, and those will pick up noise if you're using them for line level. Now, for guitars, they don't have balanced signal in them, so you cannot use a 3 conductor cable for guitars. So the TRSs are very bad for guitars because when you plug them into pedals and things like that, the TRS messes up the whole thing. So you only use unbalanced for guitars, but when you're sending audio signal out of one device into the other's line level, you want to use TRS/balance connections whenever you can. So that's really important. Other things we get into are like adapters and stuff like that. Here's another connector that you'll run into. I guess everybody has seen this. This is like a mini connector. I think it's also called like a 1/8 inch or a 3.5 millimeter. And you'll notice if you look real closely, it's actually a chip ring sleeve. So it actually takes three conductors there. But what we use this for is to take the output of like an iPhone or something, or an iPod or a computer, and run it into a sound system. And here's your other end, is your left and right 1/4 inch that you would plug into your mixing board or into your interface. Say if you want to record the output of your phone or another device that had this connector, you could plug that into your interface. What's interesting here is instead of tip ring sleeve being positive, negative, and ground, what we have is our left hot, our right speaker hot, and then a common ground. So this would be the tip hot, and this would be the ring hot. You can actually see it on there. So this is how you would adapt a stereo output into two inputs and record a stereo signal off of something. So if we go to a gig and somebody wants to play, sing the music from an iPhone or an iPad, I'll plug this into the iPad, and I don't know why Zoom just started looking different for some reason. But anyway, this is how you basically do that. You have an adapter here. There's a 3 conductor and then 2 unbalanced connections to get your audio in there. Another thing that somewhere in this massive pile of cables, let me grab one more cable. Very messy. So basically, who knows what this cable is? Anybody know what that is? Checking the chat window. Who can name this cable? If you wanted to call and tell somebody to bring this cable because you were short one and needed one, what would you ask for? Computer cable is not exactly right, but it probably would get the idea across.
Yeah,
The
power
actual
cable.
name of the cable.
Power cable.
I could hear somebody
Power
for a second.
cable.
Excuse me?
A power cable.
No, because a power cable could be any kind of power cable, right? This is an IEC cable. So when you need one of these, you ask for an IEC. If you ask for a power cable, people are going to bring you a power cable. And this is not what they would bring you. Computer cable is probably good slang for it, but there's also some computers don't use these. But this is an IEC cable. So that's the actual name of the cable. So if you are in a bind and need one and say, hey, can you bring me an IEC cable? At least they can look that up on their phone and see what it is. Now, I think there might be a such thing as a 2-conductor IEC cable, but generally speaking, that's what people call those, are IEC cables. All right, I'm going to look here in the in our book and see what else that I have not talked about. This is going a lot quicker than normal because we don't have the back and forth talk in class and the examples that I often show, but it's kind of limiting us a bit doing this on Zoom because I'm not really prepared to talk on, to teach on Zoom. All right, the idea of grounding, looking under terms here, grounding means basically that, like I talked to, when we plug into our gear, our gear is plugged into the wall, and pin 3 or the this pin here on your electricity is your ground. So That basically plugs into the earth. And like all electricity, its job is to go to the ground. And it's why people get electrocuted, because you're the path of least resistance for the electricity to get to the ground. And that's why they ground buildings, to keep people from getting electrocuted. So if a lightning hits that building or electricity goes into you, it'll decide, I don't want to go through you, I want to go to the ground here. So the idea of grounding. But in audio, we also know that the noise path is to the ground. So that's the idea of grounding, kind of means that. Unbalanced versus balanced. Obviously, we talked about that. The 3-conductor is the noise-free, balanced, and the 2-conductor is the unbalanced, and that will basically, you get noise in the system. Gauge, obviously, gauge means the size of the copper in the wire, and the larger number means smaller size, and the bigger number would be a very fat cable. A very fat cable would be a 12 gauge or even a 10 gauge, which is very big. A really light gauge cable is like 18 gauge or 22 gauge. So if you buy a speaker cable, you're going to want to get a heavy gauge, because the heavier gauge will let more power go through the cable more efficiently. And the same with your electrical cables. You can get more power through the cable more efficiently if you have a bigger gauge. Problem, that costs a lot more and it's much bigger and heavier. So if you don't need a heavy gauge, sometimes you won't buy a heavy gauge cable because it's cheaper, number one. And number two, those big cables are very, very heavy. If you start hauling around a lot of speaker cables, it can get heavy. But a lot of people these days don't haul around a lot of speaker cables because they use active speakers, and then you're just hauling around a lot of mic cables and other power cables to hook them up with. Panel mount, we ran over that. You saw panel mount was both on this box. These are obviously panel mount connectors here, and these are cable mount connectors. Now, one thing to always be said about connectors, you see that these connectors are not made by people. These are made by machines. These are called injection molded cables. Now, these are your cheap, really poor quality cables. So always remember, when you never really buy these, you're more like rent them, because they typically do not hold up very long at all. So these are just not well made. I'll grab a nicer cable here. See what we got. Here's one. Now this is a nice quality cable here. You can see it's hand soldered, and so it's got probably a good quality connector on the end, good quality wire in it, and probably a good job was done when they soldered it, because the craftsmanship of the soldering can definitely affect how long your cables last. Okay, ground lift. We talked about this way to lift the ground. And also, if you're using a direct box for a bass guitar or a guitar, something like that, and it's plugged into an amp and you're plugged into an interface, then you have two paths to ground. Well, to eliminate one of those paths to ground, you can easily put a ground lift on your amplifier, or you can hit the ground lift button on the direct box. And I'll bring a direct box next week to kind of show in class how that works. And then number 7 here is shielded versus unshielded. Obviously, shielded cables are for guitar cables and mic cables and such, where unshielded is your speaker cables. Speaker cables are the only unshielded, or the only cables that are unshielded. So unshielded basically means it is a speaker cable, all right, or a power cable. All guitar cables, line level cables, and all mic cables are all shielded cable. So you always remember those things. Very basic stuff. Okay, connectors, XLR male and female. We ran over both of those. 1/4-inch mono or tip sleeve, we ran over that. 1/4-inch stereo. 1/4-inch stereo is actually the tip ring sleeve, which can be a stereo signal if it's used for headphones, or balanced if you're sending line level audio through it. Speak on, let's look at that once more. Here's my speak on. Here's a speak on to speak on cable. And that is, and one thing you definitely want to know about these, when they go in, they have to twist and click. You see there's a little thing right there. That's how you take it out. You have to release it. But very important, if you ever use a speak-on cable, you stick it in and it's not going to work until you turn it and click it. I've gone to a gig one time where these people hooked up this PA system and no sound was coming out. And I looked and everything looked like it was hooked up good. I said, Jay, what's the matter? We can't get any sound. Finally, I put my hand on one of these and twisted it and heard the click, and all of a sudden sound came out. So you always remember with your speak-ons, when you plug them in, you got to twist them till they click, and when you take them out, there's usually some sort of device on it to make it release and then twist it and pull it out. All right. We saw the RCA cable. That's our little consumer level connection. Unbalanced, -10. Well, that's the actual ones right there. And these are most often those little cheap molded cables. RCA stuff is usually these little cheap connectors and not usually run as a really serious connection. And then the 1/8 inch was this one, which is basically the headphone output of your computer or iPhone or whatnot. Of course, with the iPhone, you have to use an adapter to adapt it down to this. They took the actual headphone jacks off of iPhones many years ago. Oh, I see one there called optical cable. Now, I don't have one, but optical cable is basically one that is called a light pipe cable, and it takes 8 channels of digital audio in and out. Since I didn't bring one, I'll bring one of those next week to class and show you guys. So I don't have optical cable handy. Power cables, I don't really have one of those, but you guys, I've all seen 3-prong orange extension cord. That's a power cable. It's got unshielded 3 conductors of unshielded wire on it, and it's got our 3 conductor electrical ends. I think everybody should probably know that. And then snakes. Snakes are anytime you have multiple balanced or unbalanced connectors going through one cable. And of course, here's your example that I brought in of a snake. And next week, when you guys come for class, I'll probably take about 10 minutes to run back over these and let you see snakes and ask a few more questions about that. I know you guys might. Here's a somebody says IEC cable recap. And what is a 1/4 inch jack? I don't know if you said anything on it yet. I did that very early on. We'll run back over that. There's a 1/4 inch. That's your 1/4 inch right there. 1/4 inch jack or plug. It's a 1/4. I guess plug might be a more proper one. This is an injection molded one, but there's your 1/4 inch, and that's where you basically guitar signals or unbalanced line level audio or speaker level can go through this. And an IEC cable recap. IEC cable is basically, a power cord that a lot of audio gear uses. So that's, so this is basically an electrical connection. So a lot of bigger interfaces, computers, power amps, guitar amps, bass amps, any kind of rack mount gear like compressors and mic preamps, they usually come with these, so you'll need one of these to get it powered up. So if you go out for a gig, most people keep 2 or 3 extras of these in their car, because I've gotten out places before and needed one. Like, for instance, you see here, there's your IEC panel mount right there. So this piece of gear will not work without an IEC cable. And I have literally hundreds of pieces of gear here and at the studio that all need IEC cables. I probably own 200 IEC cables. So IEC cables are very important. So those are cool questions. I don't know, did I miss anybody else's questions? I didn't really keep a really good eye here on the chat one. Hopefully I covered everybody's. Also, like I said, we're going to go short tonight. This is a little shorter than I thought, but it's going really quick. It's kind of hard for me to teach when I don't have any, people looking at me and such. But does anybody have any final questions about cabling or any connectors? Obviously, I'm going to put this up on YouTube if anybody missed part of it or anything. If you guys want to, I'll mail that out. Was somebody saying something?
Just today I bought a Behringer Eurorack mixing board. It's just a little cheap thing,
Yeah.
just for experimentation, but it has this type of connector that I've never seen before, for this power supply.
Yeah, so what happens is I typically try not to buy things that have those external power supplies because then you have to worry about losing the power supply and such. But those are often what you call proprietary connectors. And proprietary connectors are the things that are made by the manufacturer for that one application. So if you ever lose it, it's you have to go back to the manufacturer to get that exact one again. But I know exactly what you're talking about, and like Mackie, another company makes boards similar to the Behringer, and several other board manufacturers, Yamaha, they all make these external power supplies, but none of the connectors are the same. And I don't even know the names of those connectors, but I would just call them proprietary power supply connectors if I was to name them.
Well, that's
The
a
word
shame.
proprietary means that it's made by Sony or Focusrite or Behringer or whoever it is. They'll make things that only work on their one piece of equipment or a range of pieces of equipment, and they're useless elsewhere in the world. And those things can be very aggravating. It's good that you brought it up, though, because be careful about buying things that have real weird power cables because you got to be very careful not to lose them. I've of course lost some of these power supplies before, and then you got to go back to the manufacturer, buy another power supply, and then later, a year later, the old power supply turns up. You got two of them, and you had to pay $50 or whatever for the replacement one. So yeah, buying things with external power supplies is something to really keep an eye on, and that's why it's cool to get like the interfaces here are bus powered, so the power comes from the computer, the 5 volts for the computer. And if you get something with an IEC cable, those things are interchangeable. But if you get things that have external power supplies that are particular to that manufacturer, if you lose or break the power supply, then your unit's not going to work until you replace it one from the manufacturer. And with Behringer and places like that, sometimes that can be difficult to purchase.
I've definitely learned my lesson now because they stopped producing it like back in like 2002. So I've been on
Yeah.
the hunt right now. Yeah.
Well, typically, people look on eBay for those sorts of things, and I would just put it in a search, and I think you can find them, but it's just a little bit of work, and hopefully it'll work out for you, and you won't lose your power supply. But
Sure, yeah.
yeah, but as long as I got so much equipment, though, losing things is a big deal for me. I got mountains and mountains of stuff. I'm trying to get rid of stuff because I got so many things, and like cabling, power supply, I got so much that I just can't keep up with it all. So having too much gear like I do can be a negative thing. But that was a good thing to bring up. I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah.
Other questions like that? That was very good. Okay, well, next week we'll of course be back to in person. We'll probably have a long class. We'll go a little longer because we're going to go over signal processing. Mostly that's going to be equalization and compression. We're going to go through it with real pieces, analog pieces in here. Then we're going to go into Pro Tools and use those. But before we get started, we're going to take about 10 or 15 minutes and recap what we did here because we're going really short. And also when we do our recording night and especially our live sound night, we will be running back over the connectors again then. So we'll have plenty of time for you guys to kind of see some more about connectors and stuff. So if everybody is good on questions and stuff, I guess I'll see you later, and hopefully you guys aren't too bad off from your hurricane activities and such like that. But I hope to see everybody in class next week. Also, Midlands Tech has already contacted me, and tomorrow night will be by Zoom as well. They're closed through tomorrow, so we will not resume in-person classes until Thursday. So I guess we will see you back here. Those of you who have a Thursday class, we'll see you then. The rest of you guys will see you tomorrow night on Zoom that are in tomorrow night's class. All right, well, I guess I'll see you guys later then. I'm going to end the meeting.